Okay, good. And the first talk will be given by Eleanor Watkins.
Hurrah. Can we possibly have the lights down a little bit? I don't know whether some of the slides will come out. Thank you. So, firstly, thank you so much to the organisers for giving me the opportunity to give this talk. My name is Eleanor Watkins. I'm a PhD student working with Martin Maiden and Sunetra Gupta at the University of Oxford, and today I'm going to be talking about some of our modelling work on vaccination in pneumococcal populations. So, just a very brief overview. I'll firstly just introduce the bug Streptococcus pneumoniae, and then I'll introduce our multi-locus framework for modelling pneumococcal population structure, and then finally I'll just discuss some of the results of our model in terms of predicting what we see after vaccination. So, up here we have Streptococcus pneumoniae, also known as the pneumococcus. It's a gram-positive bacterium, which is actually naturally carried in the nasopharynx by about 10% of the population on average. And for reasons that we still really don't understand, occasionally goes invasive and buries through our nasopharyngeal epithelium into the bloodstream. It can then spread to a number of different host sites and causes a range of different infections, including pneumonia, meningitis, and septicemia. It's the leading cause of pneumonia in the elderly and children worldwide, and currently kills about 1.6 million people each year. So one of the reasons that pneumococcus is so difficult to control is its high antigenic variability, because each one of these bugs is covered by a really thick polysaccharide capsule, which is highly immunogenic. And like Sam mentioned yesterday, there are about 95 different serotypes or capsule types in total, making it quite difficult to control. So what's interesting though is that of these around 95 capsule types, serotypes, only about 15 cause most disease worldwide. So there are a number of vaccines available which only target the most virulent of these serotypes. The most widely deployed of these is the heptavalent conjugate vaccine known as PCV7. This targets 7 serotypes and was first introduced to the States in 2000 and has been licensed in over 90 different countries worldwide ever since. So one of the main problems that we face with strain-targeted vaccination is that as the frequency of serotypes targeted in the vaccine hopefully declines over time, there's a concern that we may well see an increase in serotypes not included in the vaccine. So here we just have some data from the UK showing that after the introduction of PCV7 in 2006, we can see quite clearly a really nice decrease in pneumococcal disease caused by all serotypes, and this is caused mainly by the decline in vaccine-associated serotypes. We can also see a huge increase in disease caused by serotypes not included in the vaccine. And we see this pattern of vaccine-induced strain replacement in many different countries worldwide with lots of different serotypes. So, previous frameworks of vaccine-induced strain replacement have been studied in great detail in the context of competition. For example, by Mark Lipsitch and his colleagues. These models assume really strong competition between strains, and replacement occurs because vaccination releases this competition, allowing the non-vaccine strains to fill in the niche of the vaccine-eliminated strains. Competition in these frameworks is mediated either immunologically through cross-protective immunity, or also ecologically through, for example, direct competition in the nasopharynx for metabolic substrates or host receptors. It's likely, though, that different areas of the genome are going to be affected differently by these different types of competition. So we build on these previous models by discriminating between the different types of competition acting on different classes of genes. So we can conceptualize strains as aggregates of a number of different traits. So in our multi-locus models, we can have a primary antigen, which in the pneumococcus corresponds to the capsule, like I mentioned earlier. We can have metabolic genes, and I think this is where I'll mention this. We can think of each pneumococcus as having its own individual metabolic profile, which corresponds to all of the metabolism and transport genes that it has in the genome, and I'll come on to this a bit more later. And finally, we can also have virulence loci. So in the pneumococcus, they have these extracellular structures called pili, which I'll also discuss later, and we have other virulence factors like the pneumococcal toxin. So how do we incorporate all of these traits into a model? So we just use multi-locus deterministic models. Our antigenic type is represented by letters, ABC, and we assume antigenic specific immunity is operating at this locus, but we can relax it as and when we like. The metabolic profile, which we refer to as the metabolic type, is represented by numbers, and we assume very, very, very small differences in transmission fitness between metabolic types, with, just for the purpose of today, metabolic type 1 being slightly fitter than 2, which is slightly fitter than 3. And we assume that ecological competition occurs at this locus. And what I mean by that is that a strain carrying metabolic type 1 is less likely to co-infect a host already infected with metabolic type 1. And we assume this because if two strains have a similar metabolic type, it's likely that they might compete for things like metabolic substrates or host receptors through which to access their substrates. And finally, the virulence locus. So we just have two alleles, a plus and a minus, with plus corresponding to strains that are more likely to cause invasive disease, and minus corresponding to strains that are less likely to cause invasive disease. We assume that virulence has a cost, just in the form of a reduced infectious period, and we also assume, ecological competition occurs here, because there are a number of different virulence-associated structures that have to bind to very specific host receptors, both in the nasopharynx and the bloodstream. So we can think of each strain as having its own unique genetic barcode, and we assume just simply that all different combinations of antigenic type and metabolic type and virulence type can be generated freely through recombination, just because pneumococci are highly recombinogenic. So there are a couple of interesting things that we find when we run the model. Firstly, we find generally in these systems, because of the very strong immunological and ecological competition, that most strains are outcompeted. And we see that the surviving strains have this non-overlapping combinations of antigenic and metabolic types, which might be more clearly represented in a 3x3 grid of strain space here. So we can see that the surviving strains, shown in black, do not overlap in the metabolic or antigenic alleles, and this is to minimize competition at these loci. And the other interesting observation is that when we add in the virulence loci, we can see that only a minority of strains are more likely to cause invasive disease, and the other interesting thing is that the virulence allele is associated only with the fittest metabolic type, because I mentioned earlier that metabolic type 1 in this simulation is fitter than the rest, so only the fittest type can afford the cost of being virulent. So how on earth do we look for this type of population structure in real pneumococcal populations? So hopefully some of us might have heard of multi-locus sequence typing, or MLST, which is a classic method used to distinguish between different strains in lots of different species of bacteria. The main premise being that you sequence fragments of 7 housekeeping metabolic genes, and this gives you a profile known as a sequence type. And there are a number of different studies which have done both MLST and serotyping of lots of different pneumococcal populations. So here we can just see some data from the UK with the pluses corresponding to strains which are significantly overrepresented in disease relative to carriage, and we can see this kind of nicely non-overlapping structure, again with only a minority of strains causing disease. And interestingly, we see this type of non-overlapping signature in lots of different bacterial populations, in spite of high rates of recombination, which should homogenize these associations. However, MLST only indexes variation at 7 genes, in fact, fragments of 7 genes. So I was interested in whether we could look at this at the whole genome level. So I analysed 616 genomes isolated from Massachusetts, from carriage. These were all published last year by Nick Croucher and colleagues. I then identified all the loci involved with metabolism and transport, which was about 890 out of 2,000 200. And then I looked at the allelic diversity of each of these loci using a free online tool called Genome Comparator, which is available at pubmlst.org. So here we can just see a color-coded output of Genome Comparator, where we have the allele numbers for each locus shown in rows for every isolate shown in columns. So for example, this example, number 6, means that isolate number 4 has allele number 6 at its first locus. So when we do this for 890 genes across all 616 genomes, we get something like this. So we can see that there's quite a lot of metabolic diversity among pneumococci, and they seem to cluster quite nicely into these different profiles. And what's interesting is that these profiles tend to cluster with different serotypes, which corresponds to our result from the model, but we tend to see non-overlapping associations between metabolic type and antigenic type. So this gives us some confidence that perhaps our model is a relatively realistic-ish, with all the caveats, representation of pneumococcal population structure. So what happens when we model vaccination? So we're going to model vaccination against serotype A because it's the high virulence strain. And what happens is that the metabolic type and the virulence type originally associated with serotype A after vaccination becomes associated with the non-vaccine serotype C, which suggests that vaccination might lead to increases in transmissibility and virulence among non-vaccine strains. We refer to this as vaccine-induced metabolic shift. And I'll just very briefly discuss the support that this might have happened at both first the metabolic loci and then the virulence loci. So serotype 19A is a non-vaccine serotype which has just gone completely mad since PCV7 in lots of countries around the world. So here we have some surveillance data from the States of all 19A strains, and we can see that there's been 2 really big increases in 2 sequence types, which were both previously associated with vaccine serotypes before vaccination. So these are ST695 and ST320. So this perhaps suggests, and at the same time, ST199, which was the sort of ancestral sequence type associated with serotype 19A. So we could perhaps think that maybe, or predict that ST695 and ST320 might be outcompeting ST199 because of slightly higher fitness, perhaps. And then again, if you look at the whole genome, so here again I'm going back to the Massachusetts data set, and here we have all of the 19F genomes before vaccination, and this is it's a bit confusing because they're both serogroup 19, but 19F was included in the vaccine and 19A wasn't. And then after vaccination, we can see that within 19A, this non-vaccine serotype, the metabolic profile from 19F is now expanding within 19A, which supports the model. Very quickly, just going on to the virulence loci. So I mentioned very briefly earlier that pneumococci have these extracellular structures called pili. They're involved in lots of different things, but one of the things we do think they do, as shown by mouse models, is that they mediate adhesion to host cells and are also involved in pathogenesis. They're not present in all pneumococci, so type 1 in about a third and type 2 in about 16% of pneumococci, and it seems to vary by study and by region. But what's interesting is that they bind to specific components in the host ECM. And there was a really cool study a few years ago which basically showed significantly negative associations in people between pileated strains of pneumo and Staph aureus, but not non-pileated strains, suggesting that there could be ecological competition at the pilus locus. So here we see some data from the States, and what we can basically take away from this is that before vaccination, type 1 pili were mainly associated with vaccine strains, and then after vaccination, as the vaccinated strains went down, the pili went down, and then we saw this resurgence in 2007 of a greater proportion of pileated strains coming back, and this was driven by, again, ST695 and ST320. So you could perhaps infer maybe that there might be ecological competition at this locus, and that the 19A strains, 695 and 320, were not permitted to expand before vaccination because of these vaccinated strains which were inhabiting the niche of the pileated strains, perhaps. And again, similar story with type 2 pili. So this is some data from Atlanta. And again, there's been this huge increase there's been a huge increase of type 2 pili among 19A. And again, this is driven by ST320 mainly. So there's the 19A data. So, whirlwind. Here's a quick summary. So it's likely that different types of competition are acting on different genes in the genome, and multi-locus models allow us to examine these different types of selection acting in different places. In our model, this model I presented today, we just used antigenic loci, metabolic loci, and virulence loci. And what we find under strong competition is that we get this non-overlapping associations between antigenic and metabolic types. When you impose vaccination, you get this shift of the metabolic genes and virulence genes. And I just briefly discussed tentative support for this at the whole genome level, and also that we've seen increases of two types of pilin in serotype 19A since vaccination. So thank you very much to my supervisors, Sunetra and Martin, and to Merton for funding my PhD. And thank you for listening.
For a very quick question. Maybe we start here.
So the strong association that you see is also predicted by a simpler model, which is just neutral thermal evolution.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, we've been telling Sunetra that for like a decade.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, one more and then we.
How many serotypes are generally found in each person on average, and how does that affect potentially the recombination rates and frequency?
So co-infection data is super rare because most carriage studies just take one colony, which is a shame because I think there's a study which should be coming out in a couple of months, not us, another lab at Emory, which I think found co-infection in children among like 6 or 7 serotypes, which is something which, well, I think blow the field away because it's not really very studied and we don't really understand that much about co-infections. So.
Okay, so let's thank the speaker again.